For Augusta might stand tall and above all, but based on the trailer from the 2.6 livestream, it would appear that Iuno might not agree with her. Considering all of the extra and added content that Iuno gets, this means one of two things, and I will get into those later. I will be blunt. Augusta and Iuno are going to fight. We even see the cutscene where Iuno fires at Augusta. We even hear Iuno talking about no loyalties to her, only to Septimont itself. Cartethia is being attacked by Galbrena, we have Rover probably going to fight this false sovereign, and now, we also have Iuno going to fight Augusta. Divide et imperi. Divide and conquer. Leviathan still does have the ability to split after all. If Augusta and Iuno are fighting, and it wasn't some camera tricks or a unique animation for the transition between them, then I really hope we get to play as Augusta to beat Iuno. This is, of course, assuming that Iuno gets corrupted like the trailer seemed to suggest, and works on the assumption that Augusta isn't the false sovereign as, of course, the sovereign does seem to mix lightning with their attacks. However, it's not red lightning, and as such I find Augusta being the false sovereign to be illegitimate. If I had to guess, it'll either be this guy we saw at the end of Augusta's Overture quest, or his brother maybe. You see, Effort is a magistrate position within the government of Sparta. Sparta still had a king, or more accurately, they had two kings and also a senate. It's possible that Augusta has more power than the king, or maybe it's an inspiration from Rome instead, and someone is trying to install themselves as a king, with Septimont long since casting out the tradition of kings, just like the real-life Roman Respublica. Additionally, the reason why I talk about the guy wearing purple is because in ancient Rome and Greece, purple was traditionally used by kings and rulers. The blue itself was a color reserved for the wealthy and powerful as well. And yes, they would often dye their hair those colors as well for the same reason, or at least females would. Whatever the case, someone is once again being transformed by Leviathan into this creature. Whether it's Iuno, Augusta, a king, or a usurper doesn't really concern me. I don't care about predicting everything or being right. What I do care about are the historical and Jungian parallels, so let's go ahead and get into those. I found it strange how no one was talking about Iuno, her words, and her actions in the trailer. It seems like Iuno will be antagonistic towards us, or at least towards Augusta, in some way. Hopefully my goat Cristoforo is responsible for yet another character's death while aura farming. Alright, for this next part, you're going to have to bear with me for just a moment as I dive into history, but more importantly, Jungian psychology to analyze both Augusta and Iuno. Rome had a very bad habit of constantly betraying and killing their heroes, people who'd stabilize and save the Respublica. Augusta seems to be based on Augustus Lucius Domitius Aurelianus. Aurelian is most famous for reuniting Rome when it was split into 4 separate entities, reuniting them all, and defeating pretty much every single enemy Rome had in Europe, leaving only 2 left, as well as praising the sun. The enemies were Rome itself and the Sassanid Empire. Sadly for Aurelian, he chose to go and deal with the Sassanids, but was then betrayed and killed by his trusted officers. The reason I bring up the tragedy of Aurelian is because it might be applicable to Augusta. Aurelian's nickname was Sword on Hand, which, based on Augusta's massive broadblade, is somewhat applicable to her as well. We see Iuno attempt to attack Augusta, the idea perhaps being that Augusta is being targeted by the Dark Tide for corruption and Iuno is trying to stop that. The other option is of course that Iuno is just becoming more and more corrupt. I am wholly uncertain as to what is going on here, but it wouldn't be a Kranis video if I didn't do some Jungian analysis on the situation. Most importantly, let's take a look at the eclipse. This happens a couple times, the moon momentarily overtaking the sun. Iuno momentarily overtaking Augusta. However, that's not the only eclipse. Iuno was of course born on an eclipse as well, so let's go ahead and break these down. In Jungian psychology, symbols aren't just personal, but are shared in the collective unconscious of people. It typically involves the following. Sol usually means civilization, culture, and order. Luna usually represents chaos, instinctual drives, unknown forces, and most importantly, uncontrollable forces outside of mankind's control, such as fate. The eclipse itself is indicative of crisis. Additionally, Augusta giving Iuno the apple in her Overture quest meant the same thing in the Iliad, as it wasn't just an apple, but an apple that symbolized strife and discord. This awakened societal fears, unspoken tensions, suppressed instincts. It is, in essence, a collective shadow moment for everyone involved. As for what happens, it mostly depends on the actions of the people involved. It's something that I cannot wholly predict. Obviously, failure pretty much means the civilization is wiped out or enslaved by Leviathan. However, success? That is something enigmatic to me. Too many unique variables that cascade into butterfly effects for certain characters. What I can say, however, is that success leads to a sort of rebirth of Septimont, possible new inspirations, and a forced acknowledgement of limits and therefore adaptations. For Augusta, it might be recognizing that she can only get so far with a mild forte and her skill, and might have to rely on friends for success. Perhaps Augusta will attempt to face things alone and will come to recognize she needs Iuno and likely Rover as well, or even all of Septimont. She is Deus Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. However, in real life, that great champion lost 2 battles, one in Italia against Germans, and another against the very being of Rome itself, when he was assassinated. Perhaps Augusta will avoid this fate of death by having those who trust her and whom she trusts. Iuno was born under an eclipse, which does hold meaning itself. The sun represents life, ego, consciousness. Typically things of light are representative of something positive in some way. However, this was somewhat obscured due to the eclipse, meaning that her conscious identity is unusually intertwined or communicative with her unconscious from her birth. This is even backed up in the way she fights, by summoning a clone of herself from her forte, something most people can't do. Alright, well, many like Tao Chi can actually do it by dodging, but every time someone else does make a clone, it is tied to their forte. A forte, of course, is bound to the unconscious mind. We also know that Iuno's powers are second to none in the temple, meaning that it's also backed up by statements in the game itself. The moon aspects mean stuff like emotions, collective unconscious, and temporarily overshadow other parts of a person. Which is also backed up by her saying that when she should have done something, she instead closed her eyes, implying that what she saw she had to do was something she did not emotionally resonate with. Additionally, Iuno is heavily inspired by the moon, of which I often call Luna. This typically implies things like perceived or embodying hidden truths or mystical knowledge, and is the most mystical knowledge not that of the future itself, of fate itself. It would appear that Augusta and Iuno are going to go through some character development, not in the positive sense, but in the I can't believe I survived sense. With Iuno getting so many events and attention in this update, it's hard to not feel as if Iuno or Augusta might perish. Oh, what do Nestor and Cristoforo have plotted for our mighty Ephor? Will she continue being a symbol of hope, burning eternally like the sun itself, or will she fall and have to pass on the torch to not a person, not to Rover or Iuno, but to Septimont itself? Or perhaps are these Iuno events meant as an apology to us for killing her instead? Carl Jung continues to tell us a lot about the game, from characters themselves to even plot points and story, from the wave-worn phenomenon to the rover themselves. But what do you all think? Do you think we have anything to worry about, or do you think Rover will save the day and save both Augusta and Iuno? Let me know in the comments down below. Special thanks to Takoyaki Lover, Wolfmaster256, Icy Sincere 13, and Frosty Frog OG for making these videos possible.